Hi everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo, bringing you another video. And this is going to be my final installment in my series about my journey through punk, about punk rock. And I'm going to talk mostly just show and talk a little bit about the records in my punk collection. I am by no means a punk expert, so I know there are probably plenty of you out there in the VC who are much more knowledgeable about the punk scene and about a lot of other punk bands that I won't even be mentioning, or even some other insight into, the bands that I do mention. I would really appreciate if you would, point out in the Down Under some other bands or other releases by some of the bands that I talk about that, that we all might be interested in. And I hope I tried to put everything in sort of a chronological order, but it's kind of hard to do because sometimes these bands they'd be formed, in 1 year, and they would be playing gigs, but they didn't get a record deal until 2, 3, 4 years after they'd already been playing. So anyway, I also kind of included in sort of the post-punk category, or even in the punk category, bands that are not often categorized as punk. Yet, to me, they contain the punk essence, in my opinion, which if I tried to put in words, it'd be kind of hard. I mean, it's kind of like the definition of pornography. You know it when you see it. And in the case of punk, it's kind of like that. You know it when you hear it. So some of the records I'm going to show are also from artists that I have already talked about in some of the earlier episodes of this series. Of course, there'll be links in the Down Under about these and some of the things that I mentioned. Plus, there'll be a link to the playlist on my channel for punk. And who knows, further down the road, as I acquire more punk recordings, they'll be added to that playlist. So, hey, let's get started here. I got a lot of records to go through, so I don't want this video to be too long, but it's probably going to be a long one. And I'm going to start off, I talked about this band in terms of the early punk pioneers in that video. And then I finally saw in a record store a CD by this band. Still on the hunt for, I know it's available in Discogs, but I'm still on the hunt for it in vinyl. And that is this, Los Psychos, a Peruvian punk band that formed it's a band that formed in 1963 and is widely considered to be one of the earliest punk rock bands. Neat little, so 1965 are these recordings. They actually were getting together in 1963. And a lot of it, as you see, was, they actually released a lot of singles. And so when they actually released an album, it was more of a compilation of all these singles that had come out. Back there. So yeah, you really should check them out. It's very, you can hear the origins of punk, and they're very much a garage band as well. Then I also talked about this one in that same video, Death. This is all African-American band. They're all brothers, in fact, the members of the band, from Detroit. And they formed in the early 70s. And their stuff is being reissued because at the time that they were playing, they were offered a contract, and the record company wanted them to change their name and from Death to something else. They didn't go for that. This is roughly their first one. Great album. Then they also, these are all reissues, and there's this one, Death, New, End period, dot period, W period, and it's good, but, I would rank it as like they're not as good as the first one. Or no, let me take that back. This one, this is the other one, Death 3. This one is a better one than I think than this one. They eventually transformed into more of a spiritual, Christian-oriented band with a little bit of funk and soul. And it wasn't quite as hard-hitting as that debut. And you begin to hear that transition with those later albums. They're still good albums. There's some solid tracks on it. But what they transformed into next really wasn't a sound that I was all that interested in. One that I just got this the other day, and I talked about it in that other video, Pure Hell. They're from Philadelphia, and they formed in 1974. And then they recorded the tracks on this record in 1978, but then it never got released. It wasn't until much more recently that that it got released. This is killer stuff. This is really, really good hardcore rockin' punk with a heavy metal edge to it. Seriously, and this is being reissued, so seriously look for it and get it. This is, if you like the genre, to me it's a must-have. Now I kind of discovered this band later. A few years ago, I started picking up a couple of their albums, and that is Half Japanese. So this album is actually 2017, I think. So it's a newer one. But Half Japanese, they were considered part of the art punk scene, and they formed in 1975. So they've been around for a really long time. From Maryland. This is a good album. I really like this one. I have to start listening to them again because it's been a while. Then I also have this one, which is Overjoyed. This one also is from 2014, which apparently was their first release since their last one before it, which was in 2001. So yeah, I have later stuff, but I was really surprised to learn that they formed in that sort of golden era, that golden bubble when there were so many new punk bands hitting the scene. Now, one in England that had a very socially conscious voice in their material is this one, the Tom Robinson Band. They talked a lot about, or sang about, a lot of different social issues. See, it's on the Harvest label. They also were probably one of the first punk bands to openly sing about gay rights. This is really good stuff. I was really glad that I found this recently, just digging through a record store and listening to, it came highly recommended from a lot of websites, and I did listen to it once on YouTube, so I knew it was going to be a good album. However, I need to point out that Tom Robinson, You know, if you see any other Tom Robinson records, just don't grab them thinking that, you know, oh, this is going to be some more punk. I did that with this one, and North by Northwest. That's on the IRS label. This isn't punk. This is 80s pop, and frankly, not very good 80s pop. So, but definitely you should be looking for, if you do not have this, this one here, the Tom Robinson Band double record. The original was released as a single LP. Then they released this one with the original on one LP, and then some other tracks and live tracks on the other LP. Great stuff. North by Northwest. Now, while Tom Robinson formed in 1978, the North by Northwest, which is it's a nope, was 1982. All right, so another band that I have some of their later material, but good news about, is Bad Brains. All right, so Bad Brains formed in 1977 in the Washington, D.C. area. So I have this one, Build a Nation, which is a fairly recent one in their discography. It's on some cool green vinyl. It's a 10th anniversary. So I don't see a release date on it. I also have, and that's a very solid album. I also have this one, God of Love, which was also contains a single with it when you get it. This is remastered back in print for the first time since 2004 on vinyl only. It's okay. It's got some really good songs, but there's some other songs that, you know, are a little on the weak side. However, the good news is they are reissuing this year, I believe, the complete discography. And the records that I really want to get, because a lot of their material, their original early releases, were only available on cassette. And their eponymous debut and the record Rock for Light, and then the other one, Eye Against Eye, those are the three I really, really want. They're going to be reissued, I think, starting next month, or it could be March, but they're going to reissue one each month throughout the year. So their eponymous debut will be coming out. Killer stuff. Again, you can find it on YouTube, some videos, and you can listen to it and see what I mean. Now, of course, around that time as well, or a little bit later, in 1978, in the San Francisco area, the Dead Kennedys formed. And they are certainly an iconic band in the punk scene, particularly the West Coast punk scene. Really amazing with the they've got Jello Biafra and East Bay Ray, you know, founding members. They were recently, like in just a couple days ago, I think, or maybe yesterday, or there's a lot of controversy about a tweet that went out that seemed to indicate that the Dead Kennedys were very supportive of Utah Senator Mitt Romney, also former Utah governor, and also the son of George Romney. I think he was the son of George Romney, or maybe grandson. No, I think he was son of George Romney, who was a governor of Michigan. But anyway, and you know, he was a presidential candidate, Mitt Romney. Anyway, it just seemed really surprising that the Dead Kennedys would like be endorsing or saying these positive things about that. And then it turned, and then Jello Biafra came out and said, you know, hey, this is crazy that it was their Twitter account was tweeting this stuff. And then it was revealed that the person who manages their social media account on behalf of the band was actually the person tweeting this, and not the band themselves. Anyway, so that the first one here that I got is Fresh Fruit for Rotting Tomatoes. And then I have this one here, which is, Plastic Surgery Disasters. Really great, really in-your-face content and album covers. Then we have In God We Trust Incorporated, which has the really cool, very popular hit. I want to get the name of the song correct here. Nazi Punks Fuck Off, I think is what it is. Yes, Nazi Punks Fuck Off. Because there was, at the time of the punk explosion, so to speak, there were some neo-Nazi bands who were capitalizing on this new sound. They did it also with a lot of heavy metal. And so they were kind of like joining in the scene, and some of the Nazi punk fans were stirring things up at some of the other shows, and the Dead Kennedys have nothing to do with that. Then there's this later one of theirs, Frankenchrist. Love this album. This is not one of their more highly rated ones in their catalog, but I think I like this one. I like Frankenchrist, I think, the best of theirs. I really dig it. Okay, then this is the only Black Flag I have. I listened to Black Flag on the radio back, in the 80s, but I never bought anything. Black Flag formed from the LA area in 1976, but their first recording, I don't believe, was released until 1981. This one is from 1985. This is the only Black Flag I have in my collection. There are a couple others I would like to get. And then we go to Buzzcocks, which formed in 1976, also in Bolton, England. But they were really big movers and shakers in the Manchester music scene and punk scene. This is Singles Going Steady on some colored vinyl, which is, it's my understanding, this is a collection of their singles. And but then this one is one of their regular releases. I believe it's their debut. This release was sourced from the original quarter-inch tapes. This is Music in a Different Kitchen. Oh, and other music in a different kitchen. Really nice material. This is a reissue, apparently a remaster, and a download code or whatever. But yeah, Buzzcocks, definitely great material. Then we come to another band of that era, roughly 1976, from New York, and that is the Cramps. Now, Gravest Hits is really kind of an EP. You can see the label on that. They formed in 1976 in New York, but this didn't get released until 1979. And I got learned about, there all my other records fell over, about this group from Steve Carlson. Let me get these. And the cool thing is, that's how I learned about them. They have a very rockabilly sound. In fact, they're more, I guess you could call them more rockabilly than punk, but I'm including them, in the whole punk scene. The other one I recently got is this, Psychedelic Jungle, but there are others that I do want to get of the Cramps. I really, really dig their material. They pretty much have been recording and producing stuff all along since 1976 until 2009, and that's when their lead singer, Lux Interior, died. Okay, then another group, Social Distortion. First time I heard these guys was on MTV, the late night show 120 Minutes. And I had them on CD at that time. Great stuff. I just really love. They're kind of, for punk, they also kind of, it's like blues punk, if you want to say. They're very much a blues rock influence in their sound. They formed in 1978, but of course I didn't hear about them. This would have been about 19... Okay, I'm going to say 90s. It was 1990s before I actually heard of them. And in fact, this album might be from about that time. Yeah, this is a 1992 release that I got from Music on Vinyl. Then I went back and got their earlier LA Prison Bound. Really great jam and hardcore stuff. Hardcore in my opinion. And then their debut, Social Distortion. This is also Music on Vinyl release. Music on Vinyl does have some really great releases. So this was originally released in 1990. So you can see how some of these bands, they formed at one time, but they really didn't get picked up by a record company until a lot later. Although I'm sure they must have, if this was a 1990 album, I'm going to have to look up some more, because they formed in 1976. This can't be their first release in 1990. That's a long time. Anyway, another one that I have on cassette, this is a local band from Chicago, and that is Naked Raygun. They formed in 1980, and this one is called All Rise. Really good stuff. I just happened to see this in the used CD bin at my record store. Again, a lot of these bands, especially the smaller, more independent ones, they didn't get stuff pressed on vinyl. CDs were they were starting to become more available. 1980 is still pretty early for CDs. But a lot of their catalog it's easier to find on CD than if you're going to find it on vinyl. Really, they ought to be doing some reissues to make up for that. California band from 1980 is Minutemen, and this was released double nickels on the dime. Great, it's a highly recommended record. The interesting thing is the label on the back here that the store put on it said, "The best socio-political jazz rock you ever likely to hear." I don't know. I guess maybe you can kind of say it's kind of like jazz rock, but they were part of the punk scene in California in around 1980. So now we're getting into the waning years of the original punk explosion. Things were being overtaken in the music industry by a lot of the new wave and synth pop, and that there was some good material to come out of that, but there were fewer bands, it seemed like, that were coming out and getting as much recognition in the music scene, and especially in radio play. Going into the 80s, it seemed like attentions were shifting. And but one of those bands that started was Big Black. This is a band formed by Steve Albini, who is widely known, well respected in the music industry for his thoughts about musicians relationships between record companies, musicians, making money. He was a sound and remains a sound engineer. So this was a band he formed. It definitely has that Steve Albini sound with the way he recorded. He recorded a lot of punk bands and other contemporary bands in that era. Then I also have this one, songs about fucking. Happy Otter was that side. He had his own studio. There was the basement studio. He recorded a lot of Slint's material and engineered it for them. Then there's this EP, Lungs, which I believe is his first record, released 1983. And he played all the instruments. And then he eventually got other people in the band so that he didn't have to play all the instruments. All right, so roughly about that same time, 1981, this band is not often considered punk. Again, they're considered, just with other genres. They have a little bit of a rockabilly edge to them, similar to the Cramps. But I really, really love them, and that's the Butthole Surfers. This is not their first album, but this is the first album that I acquired of theirs. I just really, really love this record. It's on the Capitol label. This is Independent Worm Saloon. Seriously, I think one of my favorite songs on here is the Annoying song. It's just, check it out. I'll put a link in the down under if I can remember here. I better write that down. The Annoying song. Hope I don't shake the table too up. And put a link to the video on that. It's just crazy. But then I did eventually start getting some more of theirs because they're being reissued, but I just don't see them often. There's this one, Hairway to Stephen, which, it had been publicized as kind of their twisted take on other popular bands and songs. And so they would play in the style of, for example, Led Zeppelin or Jimi Hendrix or something like that. And hence the name, Hairway to Stephen. It's a label. But the more I listen to some of their other albums, I think a lot of their songs are like that. And when you are listening to it, you realize, oh wow, man, this song is definitely it's kind of like they're dragging the Doors or something like that. And then this is their debut, which the name is escaping me right now. Yeah, Psychic, Powerless, Another Man's Sack. So, Butthole Surfers. I'm still looking for more on them. I just have one of this particular band that formed in, and by the way, Butthole Surfers are from San Antonio, Texas. Gibby Haynes, kind of the name of, kind of a twist on the name of Gibby Hayes. It's just funny. Anyway, is Fugazi. They're from Washington, D.C. They formed in 1986. But this particular album, In on the Kill Taker, was not released until 1993. It's the only one I have. I need to listen to this more. I really like Fugazi, but I still need to listen to this more. I originally had this album as a CD back in the 90s. When it was released, but the band is Pansy Division. They formed in 1991 in San Francisco. Steve Albini was the sound engineer, not on this one, but on a lot of their records. This one, Deflowered, was released in 1994. The content, as you probably can surmise from the album cover, is overtly gay. In terms of the songs are about gay sex, but they're fun and silly. But not all of their records are focused so much on gay content. The important thing about this record, when it was released in 1994, is this was during the height of the AIDS era, and it was one of the first records or first useful information about how to protect yourself from HIV, talking about, had inserts going in with the record to talk about safe sex, because at that time it was very difficult to get information on that. Information was basically being suppressed. There was heightened anti-AIDS sentiment that people just freaked out about it, and aggressive homophobia that was occurring at that time. It was a really, really bleak time in the community and in the nation. And they were among the few loud voices sharing information with people. They toured with Green Day, and there were some Green Day concerts that they opened for, that the Green Day crowds, they booed them. They didn't like them. And then, and his name is escaping me, Joel, the front guy for Green Day, he would come out on stage and he would tell the crowd, shut the hell up, man, or we're not coming out to play. So he was very, very supportive of the band at the start. I believe they're still making music. All right, this one, Placebo. Again, they're kind of considered, they don't get labeled punk, alternative and things like that, but I really believe they fit in the punk genre. They formed in 1994 in London, in sort of an androgynous, I wouldn't say necessarily gay content, but certainly a more open content, maybe bisexual in a way. The song Nancy Boy, which I'll have a link to that, is just a wonderful, really one. I got to write that down to make sure I remember to put that in the down under. Nancy Boy. But anyway, great stuff. And another one that does not get categorized as punk, and I don't know why, because to me they are. They're in the post-punk, because they didn't form until 2002, and that is Arctic Monkeys. I mean, when I first got this record and started listening to it, I'm like, man, this is punk. They're from Sheffield, England. This is a really excellent album. The title, I didn't write it down here. Whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not. And which is really kind of a punk theme in a way. So excellent. It's the only Arctic Monkeys I have. And then finishing up here is Proto Martyr. The Agent Intellect comes with this little booklet. Apparently, I think all of their records come with these like little booklets along with them. So back here, I haven't played it in a long time, so normally I store the wax, outside in the back of the outer sleeve. I'm definitely need to be pulling that out. I happened to see this in a Sub Pop record store in the Seattle airport a few years back when we could travel. They formed in 2010. They're from Detroit, still making records, and definitely, post-punk. The singer, his voice, for some people I could see it might take a little getting used to, but it's still good stuff. So that's what's in what I am categorizing as my punk collection. Certainly, please leave comments in the down under, especially if you have some other recommendations for any of the bands that I maybe only have one record, or if there are some other punks that I want to get. Alley Cats, they're on my list. I talked about them in an earlier video, and a good story about that, to save it for another time. So yeah, leave some comments in the down under. I hope you enjoyed this, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed, please. But remember to pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.